Welcome to the Hustle or Bust podcast powered by Paverart. Our mission is simple: to dive deep into the world of entrepreneurship, small business, and all the success, struggle, and challenges that need to be confronted in the pursuit of growth. We celebrate the entrepreneurial spirit, but perhaps most important, we want you to learn at least one idea that you can put into action immediately to make your investment in time worthwhile. In today's episode, we lay out the Hustle or Bust podcast and some initial goals. What exactly is hustle? What does where old school meets new school mean? We talk about the bell curve, in particular, the far right 10 to 20% of the population that pursues growth and is actually successful at achieving it. We dive into an example the entire small business world will relate to and is struggling with: hiring just one person, and what is needed to achieve an outcome greater than zero. Hustle or Bust. You and I know where that name came from. We need to explain to everybody where that name came from. Can you give us a little background in regards to that?
Sure. Well, we need a name. So Paverart should definitely be part of the podcast name. So powered by Paverart. What Hustle or Bust is, I've written a blog called hustleorbust.com. The blog started 10 years ago, December of 2012. I got to give my wife credit.
10? Okay.
Yeah, we, two young kids at home. We go on a rare date night to a little Italian restaurant in Memphis, Tennessee. And as wives can do, or spouses, we start talking about how life is going, how's my career going. I was a chief marketing officer for a fast growth food company called Monogram Foods. And Kim starts talking about, all right, you're the youngest one. At the time I was 38 years old, 48 now. You're the youngest one managing a team of marketing professionals for a high-growth company. But guess what? There's this world out there that you're not really into called digital marketing, social media. Twitter was just catching steam. So you better get your skills polished up here. All right, Kim, what do you expect, or what do you suggest we do? She goes, all right, why don't you start a blog? We can start a website. They're not that hard to do. We get a template. Come up with a name, and all this stuff that's been in your head since I've known you, 20 years, get it out there. Things on leadership, whatever you want to write about. Don't have any expectation, but just put it out there in the world. So just like we were 10 years ago, we needed a name. Amerigo's had crayons on the table for kids, and they had this paper napkin tablecloth. So I thought, all right, this should be easy. What's my favorite word? Hustle. From Little League all the way up to my adult years, hustle. So Kim's on her phone and we're doing domain searches. I said, how about Hustle or Bust? It was pretty quick. It came to me. And the domain was available. We bought it. And I just started writing. And over the course of 10 years, there's probably 200 different articles on various topics. So it's a good body of work on leadership, on growth, personal career management, things of that nature. So, all right, we've got to come up with a podcast here. Paverart is our profession. That's what we do. We spend a lot of hours on it. Mm-hmm. So powered by Paverart makes sense. Hustle or Bust is a catch-all for the podcast to talk about the different topics we intend to cover here.
I'm intrigued by the black and white nature of the name. It's almost like you're saying you either hustle or you're going to bust.
Right.
And when you apply it to whatever it was that you were doing on your career track and what we've done here at Paverart, I think it's apropos. If you don't hustle,
I'm curious.
You're going to crash and burn.
Hustle's got a lot of connotations. Some of them are negative. What do you think of when you hear the word hustle?
And it's something we're going to get into in a big way because I think it powers a lot of what we talk about, and that's work ethic. You've got to be able to, you've got to work. You've got to work hard. You've got to work quickly. You got to learn how to pivot. You got to learn how to, deal with adversity quickly. Okay, you can't sit on your hands. If you do, you're going to be overtaken by conflict, and whatever you're trying to do, you're going to bust. Which is why I think which is why I love the name.
Have you ever met a lazy millionaire?
No.
I think that's no. I think it is binary. Work ethic is like table stakes. It's you either put forward massive energy if you want to be successful, and everyone has a different definition of success, and that's great. But work ethic is one of those things. It's kind of binary.
So what you're saying is it's the blood that runs through all the arteries,
right?
All the veins that make an organization run, and
I think so,
and I think eventually become successful.
You got to be a little careful that you're not just throwing hours at a problem or a job or a career. Gladwell talks about this intentional practice. So it's energy. Applying energy to the things that matter in life, right?
Right.
And it's defined practice that's going to get you better at something. If you just work 80 hours a week and just grind away doing the same thing, you're going to kind of get the same results.
Exactly.
You might be a little better than your peers that are working 40 hours a week, but that's not what it's about. It's about hard work, energy, applied to the right things, getting better at over time. That's how I kind of view the word hustle. There is a binary. If you don't have that equation, that part of the equation,
exactly,
that doesn't mean you're not going to be successful, but boy, it's going to be a heck of a lot harder. But yeah, that is the name. It's been fun doing that. We didn't have any expectations when we started that blog. I was just writing. The first blog post in December of 2012, I don't know if you remember, a Billy Crystal movie, Marissa Tomei, Parental Guidance.
Oh, yeah.
There's a scene, he's a grandfather, and he's at his grandkid's baseball game, and his grandson is pitching. So he's got strike one, strike two. And Billy Crystal's like, great pitch. I think his name was Tanner. Great pitch, Tanner. Third pitch, right down the middle. The kid didn't swing. Strike three. Although the kid wasn't struck out. So Billy Crystal's looking at the kid. He's like, ump, what are you doing? This is strike three. So the ump takes off his mask. He walks over to the stands, comes over to him. Sir, there are no strikeouts in this game. They hit until they get on base. And Billy Crystal's like, what do you mean we hit? Yep. And we end in a tie every game. So Billy Crystal, old school guy. And then you hear the parents say, sit down, Grandpa. They're yelling at him. And some of them like, the old man's right. This is kind of boring. So he's like, he can't get over the fact that, wait a minute, there's no strikeouts. There's no outs. Everybody hits until they get on base. That was my first article. So I didn't have a lot to say. So I'm like, all right, I had writer's block. But I saw the movie with the wife, thought it was a movie. Let me just comment on this everybody's a winner mentality, which I think is not what life is about. But anyway, so that was my first blog post. The second one was about the Yankees. There wasn't a lot of deep thinking, but over time I started to get into some things. The 80-20 rule, the 4 Ps of marketing, how do you lead people, how have I screwed up in various endeavors. So it became a body of work, and there's a lost art to write. I'm not a great writer, but what I did see over the course of 200 blog posts in a decade, writing, like any skill, it can improve over time. So
I think you downplay your writing. Your writing it's very unique to you, and to me it sells. I've read quite a few of your blogs and all the blogs for Paverart. You're a pretty good writer. You really are. But you mentioned something there about old school, and part of the name, part of the tagline for Hustle or Bust is old school meets new school. Why that? Why is that important? And I think it's easy for us to understand the definition of old school. Okay.
Well, what were your thoughts on that? When you hear old school, negative, positive, both, what comes to your mind on that one?
I think positive. Mm-hmm. There are certain what's the word I'm looking for? Basic tenets of work that never change. Some of them are simple, some of them are complex. Some of the more simple ones are show up on time, mm-hmm. show an interest. Okay, you're going to work. If you're slated to work for 8 hours, work for 8 hours. That's old school. Mm-hmm. Take responsibility for your work. Pay attention. Be conscientious. Think about what you're doing when you're doing it. To me, that's old school. And I could go on and on. We could talk about this for 2 hours.
Well, I think it's
but new school is what I'm interested in. Where do you think that comes from? What is that all about?
There's I think every generation goes through this generation, the new generation coming up, and every generation shits on the previous generation that's coming up behind them. I think It's just kind of, it's pop culture phenomena that generation is not like my generation. There's a pride associated with that, but there's a blend of, I think you're right. I did a post once on Facebook. This is probably in year 2012. Mm-hmm. What comes to mind when you think about the word old school? And it was like 80 comments from all friends from all around the country. 80% of them were positive, work ethic, things like that. A lot of people mention their father. I think of my father. My dad's got some ways that he just, to this day, He writes things down so small on a flashcard with a multicolored pen. It works for him. He takes notes. He tracks his stocks. It's an old school habit that just hasn't gone away.
Meticulous, but
it works for him, right? There's something to be said for a flashcard and a multicolored pen. With all this technology we got with the iPads and everything, the new school piece is, look, the world is changing fast,
right?
Hyper fast. I'll give you an example. So I was the chief marketing officer maybe 2 years, and the company I was working with growing really fast. Started at $6 million, and at the time maybe it was $180 million. So a lot of growth, a lot of acquisitions, and we're building a sales and marketing team. Twitter came about, and once again, credit to my wife, Kim. She goes, "You ought to get a Twitter account." And I'm like, why the hell do I need a Twitter account? So debating with this. So she sets me up one, and I start listening more than talking. And there's different segments. There's marketing people talking. There's celebrities. There's politicians. All of this. So I start tweeting from an entrepreneurial, senior level leader standpoint. And within 3 months, all of a sudden, I get tagged on that. There was this post that came out for the top CMOs on Twitter, and I was number 99. I'm like, what the hell is this? Top CMOs on Twitter. And I'm tagged on it. And I had 1,000 followers or something like that. And I'm looking at it, and there was a published list, Sales and Marketing Management magazine, that was publishing this thing. Now, this is probably the year 2009, maybe, or 10. And there's a list of, and I'm looking at the list because I'm curious. Now I'm intrigued that there's actually a list for, and they rank it based on number of followers. And 1,000 is not a lot of followers, but at the time, it got me number 99. So I said, let me see who number 1 is. Never heard of the guy. But he clearly, he had 40,000 followers.
Right.
And I'm looking at his feed, what he's talking about. This guy's pretty progressive. He's talking about all the things that you should be talking about. He's got great skill. And I'm looking for, where's General Motors? Where's Ford? Where's IBM? Where's Google? Nobody's on the list from the big companies. And so now I'm intrigued, and I'm Googling, going to the new school thing. Where's the Fortune 500 or the Fortune 100 CMOs? They're nowhere to be found on this. So I start thinking, there's something going on here. If Twitter or social media at the time takes off, now at the time everyone was calling this a fad. This is going to go away. Mm-hmm. And everybody in my company, I
remember that, yeah.
I'd spend 20 hours a week, 10 hours a week, and they thought I was wasting time on some little side project, not knowing that this is where the world's going to go. So you can, I called it a sea change. We don't know we're living in a sea change, but we're in one, and the entire Fortune 500 CMO and CEO base is nowhere to be found. Now, eventually they got on it, but they gave up a decade. They gave up a decade of awareness, of learning the craft. So the new school, you've got a lot of great old school managers, but if you don't start to get into the new world of digital marketing and whatever is hot and learn it and immerse yourself in it, the world will pass you by. And I can't tell you how many of those Fortune 500 CMOs eventually got on. Obviously today it's a high percentage, but they gave up. How much did they give up for waiting for 8 years?
Yeah.
They gave up way too much.
Great
so I think
point.
of old school meets new school. You've got to be able to relate to the generations. There's a new generation coming up behind it. We've got a choice. We can put our arm around them, or we can just do the generational, this generation doesn't have what it takes, or mock them, or whatever it is. We're better off throwing our arms around them and learning from them, and vice versa type of thing.
Great point. I think, and for the benefit of the audience, August this year will be 4 years since you purchased the business.
Paverart, right?
Yeah. Prior to that, I think old school ran this business with some new school, little bit, but our social media presence was limited at best. We had relied on paper advertising, that sort of thing, word of mouth, contractors finding out about us through Hardscape magazine, things like that. But we still never broke through those certain specific sales barriers that we wanted to break through. It just took us forever and we were in stasis. We basically, the line did not go up. But we were profitable enough to stay in business, mm-hmm. and we stayed in business. You came on board and decided, okay, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to learn the social media aspects of this business, and you got us into that. And that's the new school, okay? Old school, I think, got us to a point where new school kicked in, and all of a sudden, now we're breaking records on a fairly regular basis, not just in sales, but in requests for quote. By any measure of any type of analysis you want to do on a business, especially a small business, we've kind of broken through that barrier. Now it's a question of how do we keep it going.
Right.
And to me, that's where I see the connection of old school meets new school.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's, one of the things that I believe in, and I think it is kind of borne out as fact. Life represents a little bit of a bell curve, right? Mm-hmm. If 100% is your entire bell curve distribution, maybe you've got 10 to 15%, maybe 20% at the far right end of the bell curve. The people that are able to grow, people and or business, they're able to grow. It might be 10 to 15%. Then you got the big fat part of the bell curve that represent the masses. Maybe that's 65%, 70%, something like that. And then you got 20% of the bell curve, the far other end of the extreme. They're declining 20% a year.
Right.
Eventually going to go out of business or people, right? So what I focus on is, success or failure leaves its fingerprints, right? So what is different about the 10 to 15% or 20% on the far end of the bell curve that are able to grow and compound over time? Mm-hmm. There are differences between that group and the masses and the people that are going extinct or declining every year.
Gotcha.
So old school, new school, you've got to embrace both, right? But there's this distribution. We can look at it in employees, in customers, in products, in businesses. The far end of the bell curve grows. It doesn't happen by accident. If it was, everybody wants to make more money. Everyone wants to get a 30% raise. The question is, how do you do it? And every business wants to grow. If it was easy to grow at 20% a year, everybody would do it. Well, the economy is growing 0 to 5%, depending on what year. Sometimes the economy is a little bit, but that's the economy in mass. Now, there's companies that grow 80% a year, and there's companies that go out of business. So to create something, Paverart was intriguing to me because it was 20 years, mm-hmm. and it was, to your point, would you use the word stasis? Kind of flatlining?
We were unable to break through the barrier of that specific sales number.
That's right.
And it stayed there for years.
So, but it was sustainable.
Right. Oh, it was very sustainable.
It certainly wasn't in this end of the bell curve declining. It was more in the masses.
Correct.
But it had great assets that could, if polished up, we could possibly transition over here. But that's not easy. If it was easy, we had smart people. We had some of the best, the founding team that I've ever seen in any business with you, your brother, and Mick. Rest in peace. But getting to that far end of the bell curve, difficult, really hard. So the hustle or bust mentality says, let's look at the entire population mm-hmm. of customers, of people, of employees, and let's understand the ones that either get it today or they can get it. And how do we transition them to growth, and what does it take? It's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would be growing, but they're not. So a lot of people, the hustle part of applying that knowledge and digging into what creates success in the growth world,
right?
Difficult. Really is difficult.
Well, let's transition from Paverart and go back to Monogram. I'm sorry, Monogram. Yep. How did you tie that off with them? I mean, they were a little, maybe critical is too strong a word, but Mark, why are you all tied up in this kind of stuff? How is this going to help us, continue to make this? We need to keep these sales going. How does this new school mentality tie that off for us with Monogram?
Well, it's a great question. Monogram is one of the most successful consumer products companies in America. From where they started in, I guess it was 2005, to where they are today, they're well over $1 billion in revenue. One of the great success stories in the consumer products industry. Great founding team. I'm still friends with all the people on the founding team. Founding team looks a little different now. We're the senior management team.
Sure.
Looks a little different. I was relatively young. I started with them when I was 32 years old, and worked with them for a great 8.5 years up until a point when I was 40. And I had great relationships with the team. I had a great relationship with the CFO. I was an analytically driven, sales-minded marketer, so to speak. I came up through sales and marketing, and I had a knack for financials. Part of it was I had a great relationship with the CFO. I had a great relationship with the operations team. So my role at Monogram was to do the planning process. How do you build an annual operating plan? Focused on sales and marketing, but you can't focus on sales and marketing unless you really know operations. Mm-hmm. Cost management is a big deal. So having relationships across different functions of a business, a general manager's mindset helps. And if you're good at that, you're going to create a lot of value. So the digital marketing, my role at Monogram, digital marketing was a very, very small percentage of my time. And it was kind of like the thing that kind of kept me energized to learn it and advocate for that within the company. But the nuts and bolts of my job and my role at Monogram was to drive bottom line and top line growth, drive top line growth in a profitable manner. Anybody can grow, or not anybody, but growing revenue, I wouldn't say is easy, but growing profitable revenue is a lot harder, and it requires a lot of pieces to come together.
Isn't it interesting, though, that since that time, okay, that was 2012? Okay. Since that time, the impact of social media, and let's just say that social media is a big chunk of New School, the impact of social media across the spectrum of business in this country it's enormous. It's now, it's now bedrock. You can't get away from it. It is so important.
We spend our time there. I mean, who doesn't wake up and check their Facebook or check whatever social apps are on, check their grandkids' pictures for whatever reason? That's where we're consuming our information and our time.
Then the idea then is that tying old school to new school is very, very important. Old school's important too. Values, the etiquette of a work ethic, all of that's critical. Everybody has to have that in order to be successful, but you have to have new school ideas,
right.
New school, whatever that broad definition is, you got to have that too.
Right.
They have to come together.
Look, I believe you are what Google says you are, as a person, as a business.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right?
Okay.
So it doesn't matter what my opinion is of Paverart.
Right.
When you Google Paverart, what are you going to find? When you Google the name Mark Oliveto, what are you going to find? And I don't know if you ever Googled your name, but people are brands, and you either have information about you out there, and it's good or bad or indifferent.
Right.
But you are what Google says you are. That's the world we're living in. So if you're not even found on Google, that's a problem, whether it's your business or your name. But that's the world we're living in. So
exactly.
That doesn't mean, is it a skill to game Google and get up there high? Yeah, sure it is. That's called SEO. That's the fancy search engine optimization. But that's a function of, if you read a little bit about SEO and try and learn that, it's content. It's being an authority on a topic. So if you're a business selling widgets or Paverart, you got to try and improve that. And that's a whole different skill that I certainly did not grow up with for the first 20 years out of college. That came on after the scene. But Google, no one can deny the impact of Google. But if you're a consumer, I don't know any consumer that makes one major purchase that's not going to Google to ask a question.
Great point.
Right?
Yeah.
So if your product, if you're not having a Google mentality, that doesn't mean you can't be successful, but you're behind the eight ball if you're not thinking in terms of that, I believe.
As we get down into the more nitty-gritty of the future podcast topics, we'll expound on that more specifically as it relates to our little business, which is not so little anymore. But I think it's chock full of lessons to be learned.
Why don't we take some of the stuff we talked about and talk a little bit about the summer? And if you're a business like Paverart that wants to grow, one of the key components of that is people, right? And recruiting.
One of the key issues here, between the months, and this is again Paverart specific, between the months of let's just say late March and late October, I mean, that's our hot season. I mean, that's when we have to produce. That's when we've got to get stuff out the door. That's when people are interested in our product. When spring breaks and fall goes into winter, that between those two periods of time, that's our hot season. It also coincides with when high schools let out from mid-June to mid to late August. And the availability of summer help and the fact that we need it because we've got so much going on. We have our core group of employees who are very good, but they need help. They need assistance in regards to every one of the different parts of their jobs.
And if we don't get them that help, we're generally capped. We're not going to grow at an accelerated rate.
And that's exactly what I was going for. The fact of the matter is, well, you know the old adage, you got to make hay when the sun shines, and we've got to make a lot of hay between basically April and the end of September or October, and that's generally when we also get our big projects that require a lot of, a lot of thinking, a lot of organization, and a lot of hands. So yeah, that's part of the reason why Paverart, as a small business, can be successful, because I think we've started to tap into that. We've started to figure out.
Let's go back to the 16 years, the stasis. Were we ever able to successfully recruit young talent at a repeatable level?
No. Now, that's not a hard no. That's basically
spotty.
Everybody that's in the business when you're our size, and you get an influx, a big chunk or a big influx of sales during a certain specific period of time, you're hustling. What are you doing? Mm-hmm. You're putting in more hours. Okay, instead of working 60 hours a week, you're working 80. Mm-hmm. Okay, and everybody's doing that, but it's almost like there's no time to figure out how you're going to go get that additional help.
And the environments. Let me show you one thing that I came across. Neat little chart. This is a chart from 1948 to a projection of 2024. It's the teen labor force participation rate.
Exactly.
So they're measuring teens at 16 and 19 years old. They're looking at it from 1948 to 2015, and they're projecting it out to 2024. So I was a teen in the late 80s, early 90s. The labor force participation rate for teens, 55%. Projected out to 2024, it's half of that. Less than half of that. They're projecting 25%. So think about it. When I said success tends to leave clues, and if growth was easy for every business would be growing at a double-digit rate, but they're not. We're competing in it. All businesses are competing in an environment where there's essentially half the labor force, the young labor force,
right,
that's even wanting to go work. Right. So again, we can get cynical about this and say they just don't want to work anymore and just leave it at that. And we can give up. And the influx of orders that we have, instead of it taking 2 months to get out the door, it's going to take us 4 months. What did we really grow in that? All we did is built a backlog. We didn't create more profit to the bottom line. If we get the labor in, we can possibly get it out in 2 months. And then we have significant profits to reinvest in growth, buy new machinery, increase compensation, do a lot of good things. But the environment for getting young talent, by this chart alone, is significantly harder. Why don't we talk about all the efforts that we did to try and get one person?
Well, first of all,
which was painful.
First of all, the concept of the brick by brick program basically came into play. The amount of effort that went into putting that together, and it was predominantly yours, but that just the concept, the apprenticeship program, which is what brick by brick is, where you're going to bring in someone who's just graduated from high school instead of going to college, or being in that group of kids that college for them is a reach because it's expensive. It just may not be within their capabilities of getting there. The whole brick by brick apprenticeship program tackles that.
So we felt there was a market angle that we can speak
Correct.
To, and a need.
Yeah, a need, and at the same time, that was coupled with kind of a what am I looking for here? It's a kind of a little pet peeve of both of us, which is the whole idea of college debt. Okay, and the inaffordability of getting a 4-year college degree, and the inaccessibility of that for a big chunk of this country without jumping through hoops, putting in tremendous amount of, securing tremendous amounts of debt, either for your parents or for the kid himself. Very, very difficult. But the idea here was, okay, we had the program in place, and we'll talk about brick by brick and the specifics of that probably at a later time. But in order to get that first child, okay, that first 18-year-old or 19-year-old, we actually went to 4 career days this year, okay, when you include setup, drive to and from, you're looking at least 3 to 3.5 hours per. 3 of them were during the day.
With me, you, and one other person.
And one other person.
That's so man hours were tripling that.
It's exactly right. And then one was in the evening, which was basically just you and I.
Mm-hmm.
And we interviewed, at the end of the day, it was probably about 100 kids. And we wound up with, as we up one.
Right. Well, let's go back. Let's wind it. We built a website and developed a program with 15 blog posts.
Right.
With 8 pages, videos, content. Let's just say we put
that's the nuts
Dominic,
and bolts.
Kim, me, 50 hours, and you did a lot of editing and contribution too. 50 hours on a website.
Right.
And then the 4 career fairs, man-hour wise, we're probably pushing another 50, right? If not more.
And who are we competing against at the job fairs?
And we go to the job fairs, and we got ShopRite next to us. We've got the local town. We've got all the brand names. We got Amazon.
Right.
Got all these companies, and you got kids coming in. What was interesting, the last career fair,
including the bouncy house people.
The bouncy house people. We're competing against real.
They
people.
had a line. Their line was bigger than ours.
We've got Amazon, and we got the bouncy house people, and here's a little Paverart trying to compete, right? Why don't we talk about the last one, the 30 kids that we saw at the evening career fair, which I think was different.
Right.
Break down that, again, let's bell curve, 30 people. There was a big group in the middle that all kind of behaved the same way. What was your memory of that?
Interesting. First of all, there were more packs of kids and kids with their parents. They travel in packs, okay? And if you're going to get, you're not going to get one. You've got to get the whole group, okay? And
so they're going with their buddies.
And you got to get them to come to your table. But
how many were in packs of the 30?
What's that?
Of the 30 kids that we saw, how many were in packs?
95% of them.
26, 27.
Yeah, easily. But what's interesting was, and what was interesting to me, and I know it was interesting to you too, those that were walking by themselves and they were going from station to station, they were the inquisitive ones. They were interested in seeing what's out there.
The ones that didn't go with mom or dad or a buddy.
They didn't get in that long ShopRite line. And again, this is nothing against ShopRite. Okay, that's all work is dignified as far as I'm concerned, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's fantastic. But who there knows what a Paverart even is? Okay, we had to put together giveaway stuff so that when they left, they would remember and understand and get a better knowledge of who we were and what we do. But there was one guy that came in by himself, and he was, to me, as soon as I set eyes on him, and oh, by the way, he was the first guy that came in that night. He was one of the first guys that came in through, one of the first high schoolers that came in that door.
By himself.
By himself. And he looked like he was on a mission. This kid was on a mission. He was there for a reason. No parent, no other friends. He was by himself. And we basically, it was like we weren't going to let him go. We went and got him and brought him to the table and talked to him first. And subsequently, after we hired the guy, which by the way is the successful conclusion of this story, he told us that he was there to see somebody else. Okay, specifically, he was told to go see the Gloucester County Maintenance Department, Public Works Department. That's what it was, and that's what he was there for. Okay, but it was almost like fate. We wouldn't let him. Come here. We want to talk to you, and that's how that worked out.
Now let's step back and go back to the principle that if it was easy to grow, everybody would do it.
Right.
A website, 50 hours, 2 or 3 Indeed postings, few $100, countless resumes reviewed, 3 morning career fairs with 3 guys there from Paverart, talking to countless people. The bell curve taking shape where 95% of them.
Wait a minute. Let's not forget our local high school and the number of hours that you spent trying to track down the right person, and this high school's right down the street.
Right.
You can't. There's nothing more convenient than someone from that school coming to work for us.
Because it's a 9-iron away.
Whether it's summer work,
Right.
or whether it was somebody that would qualify for the brick by brick program.
Exactly. We had a Saturday. They brought local business leaders together with the government and in the school leadership, and that was a 2-hour investment in time.
Sure.
Countless knocks on the door at the local high school, and really turning up snake eyes. Principal's on a medical leave. They haven't hired a job coordinator person or a liaison. 5 reasons why we can't start right now. So in my mind, as a citizen, nothing scarier than an 18-year-old sitting home in the summer doing nothing. No job.
Absolutely.
Those kids at that local high school are more exposed to that based on experience that I have knocking on their door unsuccessfully. And we're not talking about one time or an electronic job posting. This stuff is hard. Yet over here at the Career Day Fair, we've got a principal that tries to organize 3 local schools, has 3 career fairs, has one at night. The principal's coming by and says, "Yeah, we want you to be successful." Now, how can this again?
And by the way, he's there for each one.
And he's walking the floor in the 90-degree humidity in that basketball court room that we had our career fair. So success and leadership tends to be different. That's the bell curve.
Right.
So different outcome there, different approach versus our local high school here. It's just different. So we hired the kid over there. But back to the story of if growth was easy, everybody would be growing.
Mm-hmm.
The website, the 3 career fairs, the Saturday trying to build relationships, the hiring of Anthony, right? One kid, all the money, all the time, all the effort, and we get one kid, which is great. That's success. Maybe part of it is this teen labor participation rate. That doesn't make it easier. But one kid. Now, what the question is, what's the impact of one kid? Could he be a brick-by-brick apprentice where 4 years from now he's competing against any kid in the land with a degree, with 4 years of work experience,
sure,
25 grand? I think that answer is going to be yes, and we're going to wait to see if that. But we're going to do our part. But that's a lot of work for one kid. But if we don't get that one kid, we don't grow. So we spent an enormous amount of time, effort, and money on getting one kid. But if we can't knock that down, we don't grow at the rate we want to.
Well, it's like
that's hustle or bust right there.
Gotcha. And that's, you know what, that's a great tie-in. The idea here is that once you get over that initial hump, okay, now we know better, number one. Number two, you know, we can clean up and hone the approach that we've taken. We've got the component parts. We've got smart people in all the right places. All the stuff that's been done to lay out the infrastructure for the program, it's there. Now we have to execute the program.
Right. That's right.
But you had to get the first one, and Anthony's the first one.
Right. So the question is for small businesses out there. We're coming into summer now, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are other small businesses doing? So if they aspire to growth, number one, are they successful bringing in new young talent that can stay with them for a relatively long term? Yeah, yes or no, and what are they trying to do?
Right.
I suspect there's a large percentage of businesses, just using our own experience, that would like to grow, but are not successful getting that talent base in for the summer. Because it's hard. And that doesn't make them bad people. We worked our ass off to get one person.
Right.
So it's fair for me to say they'd like to grow. I think everybody wants to. They put some effort forward, but they didn't get that one kid or that 2 kids or 3, whatever they need.
How much of this is right place, right time?
Some of it. But
you know,
if we're not at the fair, we don't get that one kid.
Which is what, well,
if we're not at the plate, we're not going to hit the ball.
My point in saying that is just what you said.
Right.
If you don't have this broad spectrum
right.
of things that you're
right.
doing,
your chances of hitting the ball increase by a factor of 10 if you swing.
It's exactly
right. Unfortunately, getting to the plate is a little fearful, right? Who wants to go to a career fair? You just came back from California, a 10-day or whatever, 7-day vacation, and the next day, and you got jet lag. The next day, we got to go to this freaking career fair at 7 o'clock at night. Not exactly the first thing on your list. So that's hard, right? I didn't exactly want to grind away and then go there and get a hotel room because I got a 82-mile commute. That stuff is hard, right? But we don't do that one last thing. We built the website, we did the 3 fairs, and it got 0. And we did the Indeed postings, doing all this work. It was that last leg that got us the outcome that we needed.
Yep.
Now that was the result of all the other work that we did. So, but it's hard. The summer does present the opportunity for businesses across America, I think.
Yeah.
You got talent.
Exactly.
If you can get them, you want to go wide open in the summer. While everyone else is at the beach, you want to see if you can take your business to a new level. So we're in a fortunate position. Now we've got extra labor, extra hands, more team members, and we've got a book of business that we've never had before. So I look at the summer saying, we got 8 weeks. Let's see what our results can be, what we can get out the door. And then for fun, let's take those 2 months and multiply it by 6 and call that our annualized business of what's potentially possible. So 52 weeks might be a marathon. 8 weeks is a sprint. So let's see if we can sprint for 8 weeks with our new team members, our new mindset, all the great marketing and sales that we got, and then annualize that and see what the potential is. That's what summer provides you, a window to sprint, where you can then say what's possible for a year. Now, it doesn't mean we won't decline if we screw things up. Anything's possible. But that's the opportunity that summer gives you, enough of a window to be projectable to see what's possible for a year.
Well, you're applying the principles of hustle or bust, old school and new school, all the things that I think in the long run have made this business survive and then go to the next level, and will allow us to go to even more levels after that.
Who do you think?
It all ties in beautifully.
Because this is a podcast. There's a gazillion podcasts out there, right?
Sure.
So
3 million is by last count. Yeah.
So one of the things, and I think we'd be committed for 52 podcasts, right? Mm-hmm. 1 a week for a full year, and I don't care if we get 0. Part of the thing, I think you got to go into it. That's kind of how I did the blog. No expectations. I don't care if 1 person follows it or 0. Turned out to get a following, right?
Sure.
So we might have that here, we might not. We don't know. We got to learn this as we go, and Dominic's got to produce the heck out of it and help us market it and figure out.
Yes.
By the way, find our niche.
A nod to Dominic Olivito as an excellent producer. What everybody's seeing and hearing here comes as a result of all his hard work.
We ain't gonna figure it out.
Yeah. Well, he hustled. He hustled so that we don't bust.
Right.
Okay. And that's this is all definitely new school.
Who do you think the audience that can benefit from this podcast is?
The first and most important one is small business entrepreneurs, small business people who basically turn their back on, and I shouldn't say turn their back, but they're not interested in going to work for, a megalithic company. Okay, that's definitely worthy. That's fantastic. I mean, there's millions of people that have done that and will continue to do that. But if this is where your mentality is, we'll be talking about the things that affect small businesses like this. It's what we're most familiar with. Now, you're also most familiar with how this works, how these ideas work in a larger business setting. But I think what we're bringing to the table is some ideas, some suggestions with some serious background, some serious experiences that small businesses would be interested in hearing about.
I think you're right. I think this going back to the bell curve,
right?
That far 10%, 15% that aspire to grow or are growing. You can go on in the world of small business. There's at any given time there's 2.5 million small businesses for sale in America. Owners might be 75 years old. They don't have a son or a daughter to transition a business to. So they try and sell their business. Most of them won't be successful, or they won't be happy with the price that they're going to get for it. For a number of reasons. They haven't created a big enough business, a sustainable enough business, a business that can be transitioned easily. But most of those 2.5 billion businesses won't sell. It's hard to sell a business. If you think it's hard to sell a house, in a lot of ways it's easy to sell a house. A small business to sell, very, very difficult. So you've got to have a strategy to be able to create a business of value that you can sell. That tends to be that far right part of the bell curve, and that doesn't happen easily. But it certainly can happen with the right strategies, the right team, the right products, the right execution. I think they can get a benefit from this. I think the young kids can get a benefit from this mentality of taking old school, proven success principles and blending it with the new age. I think we can have an impact with that younger generation.
If you look at what we just both said, the individual can benefit from this. I truly believe that. Small businesses, by definition and by nature, are run by people who are capable of wearing 5 hats at one time.
Sure.
And people who are capable of pivoting, quickly within a 15-minute period of time from one problem to the next. And it's not always problems, but you have to be able to do that every day, and you have to come to work every day. You can throw a lot of hours at any problem, but you have to have that extra thing,
Right.
okay, that commitment. Obviously, you have to have the intelligence, but you have to have the background and experience too. I think people who want to do that sort of thing with their lives may benefit from this podcast also. And it's not just the small business. It's also about the individual, and the things that we learn here, the things that we experience here after the years of time that we've invested in this business.
And the mistakes. Look, I can write a book on the number of mistakes I've made.
But they can be that's an investment in an individual, and you learn from that. And I think it makes you a better person. I really do. So,
Yeah, look, I think we can, over 52 episodes, there's a lot of ground to cover, from leadership to new product development to how do you deal with a person that can't seem to show up on time 5 days a week, which is a real problem, right? That's a common everyday problem, not just getting new talent in the door, but growing existing talent. So there's a host of issues. I think it'd be kind of cool to interview some people that have been in different things.
Look, we're not the be-all, end-all.
Well, wait, when you do the math on your working life, you wake up, what time do you wake up in the morning?
Well, it's usually about 3 o'clock.
Well, yeah, so when you look at work in the context of your life, work consumes probably, 2/3 of your waking hours
Right.
in your life is work. It boggles my mind how many people are miserable at their job. So, part of this whole hustle or bust mentality, the podcast that we talk about, if you don't like what you're doing and you're liking it more and more each day and you're kind of miserable, boy, that means your life is miserable, or 2/3 of your life is miserable. The grind of your 12-hour day or 8-hour day, whatever it is that you work,
Right.
that process of the work, of doing whatever it is that you do, has got to be enjoyed. So that is a mentality, it's an attitude, it's an approach to business or your job that I think too many people, they grind away. They can't wait. They dread Monday morning and they can't wait for Friday. Right. Now, I love Fridays too, right? I think everyone just loves Fridays. But that journey has got to, and it took me a number of years to try and embrace that journey and enjoy the process.
Sure.
And the struggle. The struggle, because there's, in a small business, there is more struggle than success. So you've got to learn that is the job. That is the thing that you've got to get the enjoyment out of. It takes a lot of people a number of years to figure out, all right, that struggle is where the joy is. Not everyone gets there. But until you kind of embrace that, and the problems, they're going to be coming at you every single which way.
It's the toughest
you got to
part.
be able to knock it down.
That's the toughest part when you're speaking to someone, to a young person who's, you're speaking to that young person from the standpoint of somebody that's already gone through all this. Okay, when you're a young person and you're just getting into that type of atmosphere, business atmosphere, it can be daunting. I mean, you get hit with this. You get hit with all these issues day after day after day. Well, when you get into your 50s and 60s, you've already gone through all this. There's virtually nothing that you're going to be hit with that you haven't already seen 30 times.
Right.
But I think that's the purpose of hustle or bust.
Yep.
Old school meets new school. I think that's what nicely ties all this together. So
Agreed. It should be a fun 52-week run, and then we'll see where we're at.
looking forward to doing that. So I guess at this point we should wrap this up.
Let's wrap her up.
Thanks for anybody that's actually watching us or listening to us. And we bid you adieu from Mark and Mike and our producer Dominic. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.